want to welcome you to this morning's committee hearing. We have several items, 8 items before us today. Mr. Clerk, you want to go through the agenda?
Very good, sir. Item number 1, Chief Legislative Analyst Report and Resolution, Parks Perry, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 federal legislative program opposition to H.R. 689 Blumenauer, which would provide for the rescheduling of marijuana and for the medical use of marijuana in accordance with the laws of various states.
You know what, Alan? Read 1. Can we take up 1 through 4?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do that for now.
Very good. Item number 2, CLA Report and Resolution, Parks Perry, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 federal legislative program opposition to H.R. 710 FAR, which would amend Title 18 of the United States Code to provide an affirmative defense for the medical use of marijuana in accordance with the laws of various states and for other purposes. Item number 3, Resolution Parks Perry, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 federal legislative program opposition to H.R. 499 Police, the Ending Federal Marijuana Prohibition Act of 2013, which would decriminalize marijuana at the federal level and leave the states a power to regulate marijuana that is similar to the power they have to regulate alcohol. And lastly, item 4, CLA Report and Resolution, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 federal legislative program opposition to H.R. 784 Lee, which would amend the Controlled Substances Act to exempt real property from civil forfeiture due to medical marijuana-related conduct that is authorized by state law.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. We have two special visitors with us today. The first will be the council member from the 8th District, former Chief of Police, Mr. Parks. We're on items 1 through 4. Would you like to come forward and speak on those items? You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. And I'd also asked if we could have Chief Rainey, who's the president of the California Chiefs Association, to come up.
Sure. Chief, please come up. Welcome.
Okay. Basically, and I'll go through general comments on all 4 and then go into specific comments.
That's fine.
On all 4 of them, it appears that there's an attempt to legislate marijuana as a medicine, when in fact there are very defined ways in which medicine is derived in the United States by going through the FDA and not legislated by moving it from one schedule to the other. And so I think that's what the concern is. And I think if any of us have seen advertisements on TV or recently received a prescription, you see all of the secondary concerns about medicine and after effects, which seem to be ignored when we're dealing with marijuana. But if we go through looking at the first one, item 1, 689, basically, again, it's attempting to legislate medicine. The medicine requires both FDA and DEA to have specific findings based on the objective research. This law would allow the states to be a regulator of one specific medicine, as opposed to the current process of having FDA be the regulator of medicine throughout the United States. And I think if we look at the last paragraph of the CLA's report, it pretty well capsulizes what the primary concerns are, in that the fact that they're dealing with marijuana, a drug of unconfirmed medical value, would receive exemptions from all of the normal regulatory framework of existing prescription drugs. And I think that would be a major danger, and would certainly ask the committee to oppose that. And looking at H.R. 710, again, it requires states to create a legislation which is in conflict with the U.S. Laws that specifically prohibits marijuana usage as a medicine. Federal law preempts states from controlling marijuana as a drug. And again, it goes back to the FDA and the DEA cannot be asked to legislatively remove these schedules, but have to go through an objective study. If residents of California, it also conflicts in the sense of the state of California, with the compassionate use law, which basically, if it were followed, most people using medical marijuana in the state of California would not come in conflict with the law. It's only when it becomes a retail business that law enforcement gets involved. And then on H.R. 499, that deals, again, with a legislative issue as opposed to a medical issue, and it wants to move marijuana legislatively from all schedules and put marijuana under the jurisdiction of ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearm, and basically totally decriminalize it and make it in a sense to where it's regulated almost as it would be for alcohol. They want to remove the felony drug offense and also the penalties, and basically the Federal Alcohol Administration would establish guidelines and a process, again, moving it completely out of the drug culture into an administrative or Federal Alcohol Administration. And then finally, on H.R. 784, again, it eliminates a tool for federal law enforcement, and it's clear, if people are familiar with the civil forfeiture laws, they are regulated by the court. It's just not that the federal government goes in and forfeits property. It has to go through a long, laborious court process. And to, again, remove a tool and make it more difficult for federal agencies to prosecute those that are using medical marijuana locations as a front for illegal marijuana does not appear to be in the best interest of law enforcement. So I would hope that we would, as a committee or a council, recommend opposition on all four of those.
Chief, did you want to make a statement?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Kim Rainey. I'm the president of the California Police Chiefs Association, and I have the privilege of representing the 330 police chiefs up and down the state of California. And we are very concerned about the movement, some of the legislation that's happening both at the national level and the state level in regards to looks like the strategic attempt to decriminalize marijuana and drug use in both our state and in our country. So on item number one, H.R. 689, our concerns is that rescheduling marijuana would really have nothing to do with medical research. If they reschedule it to a Schedule II, the reality is, I think cocaine is also a Schedule II drug. And the concerns are that people feel that if they reschedule this, it would enhance research. But that's not true. There's over 30 research sites being done right now to test marijuana. There's a procedure for that. Schedule I status does not prevent a product from being medically researched. In fact, there's over $14 million being spent right now to research marijuana and the different cannabinoids and extracts from marijuana. But the reality is it's really an FDA decision, and the FDA has been very clear that smoked marijuana does not pass the rigorous test to be a medicine. And so we are very concerned about this legislation. For agenda number 2, H.R. 710, what this appears to do is it's bad public policy. Is that this is, with one stroke of a pen, this legislation would basically override any state legislation across California and across the United States in regards to marijuana. It probably violates the Federalist principles of the Constitution, and again, we just think this is very poorly considered and poorly drafted legislation. For item number 3, with H.R. 499, what this is, in our opinion, is this is Prop 19 on a national level. If you remember, in 2010, we went through Proposition 19 in the state of California, basically an attempt to decriminalize marijuana. That initiative was defeated at the polls. This bill would legalize marijuana at the federal level, and I think we have to be really concerned about the unanticipated consequences if we do that, because really this is about another intoxicant in our society. And our position is that there needs to be a national conversation about marijuana, and it needs to be very well thought out. There's unanticipated consequences. There are long-term health care consequences. There's health care costs. I think we all realize that the health care system in the United States is challenged, and now to try to decriminalize or legalize another smoked intoxicant would create problems in our health care system, on our highways. We have more people than ever being killed by drivers who turn out to be under the influence of marijuana. and this is, again, just poorly thought-out legislation. As far as H.R. 784, the civil forfeiture, I think all of us are realistic about the medical marijuana dispensary issue in that whether we'll admit it or not publicly, most of those are for-profit operations, and they are operating in violation of federal law. And for some of the large-scale dispensaries, this would take away a tool to take away the assets in the forfeiture that are for-profit, that are operating for-profit in what's supposed to be a nonprofit environment.
Thank you. To close, Mr. Parks?
Just one other comment, and the Chief reminded me of one thing, that we have all taken a position on smoking and the carcinogenic impact of smoke and secondhand smoke, but yet there seems to be a lacking of understanding that smoking marijuana has the same carcinogenics. The state of California has deemed it as a carcinogenic in smoke, and yet we have people that are on one side saying don't smoke, but it's okay to smoke marijuana, which is another major inconsistency. So that's on the health part. But we basically, in looking at these issues, and I'm sure that Colorado had a lot to do with this flurry of activity at the federal level, and we would just believe it's opening a door that we don't want to or should not want to open, and it would be almost impossible to close it.
Okay, thank you. In fact, thank you both. So, Mr. Parks, what I'm going to do is we'll deal with these 4 issues, and I know you have some other concerns, but let's deal with these 4 now. Members, halfway in my gut, I would receive and file these issues, but due to the, Mr. Parks taking the time to come and knowing how other members feel, I think that it's important that we continue this discussion, Mr. Parks. So what I will recommend to this committee is that we move items 1 through 4 to council. I am not prepared to do it with a recommendation, but at least we keep the conversation alive, and I do think it's worthy of it. Chief, I want to thank you for taking the time. In fact, you're the chief of?
The chief of the Covina Police Department here in Los Angeles County.
Okay, well, you didn't have to go too far, but thank you for adjusting your calendar to be with us today. So Mr. Weezar and Mr. Labange, on items 1 through 4, I'm recommending that we move these to council without a recommendation. Any objection? Then so ordered, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Englander, sit tight. I'm going to get to you quickly. Items 5, 6, and 8, I think we should take up now. I do have a public, Chief, I've got you as a public speaker on item 6, so why don't you come back up to the desk and make your point. Just sit down and relax.
I'm not sure about the protocol. I'd really like to speak on item number 5, which is the position on SB 439.
And, Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to read 5, 6, and 8 into the record. Item number 5, Resolution Parks Englander, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 state legislative program opposition to SB 439, which would exempt, which would exempt marijuana collectives, cooperatives, entities, and persons from criminal prosecution or punishment. Item number 6, Resolution Parks Perry, relative to including in the city's 2013-14 state legislative program opposition to SB 566, which would permit hemp to be grown in California under federal approval by defining industrial hemp to be excluded from the definition of marijuana. Item number 8 is a CLA report and resolution relative to including in the city's 2013-14 state legislative program opposition to AB 651, the Re-Entry and Employment Opportunities Act.
Okay. Now, Chief Rainey, since you filled out a general public comment card, I definitely want to hear what you have to say. But I do want to inform you and Chief Parks that these bills have been converted to two-year bills in the legislature, which means no action will take place on these items. So my recommendation to the committee will be that we continue these three items. But with that said, Chief, please go on and make your point.
Thank you, sir. And I agree with your position. I was up in Sacramento Tuesday. It's my understanding this bill was pulled from the Health Committee. Our concern, though, is that there may still be a movement to suddenly drop this back on the floor and have some decisions made on this bill. That's what we're starting to hear in Sacramento. So our concern is that...
Well, I spent a few years up there, and I know how things can just...
I know you do.
You blink an eye and things can appear, so I get that.
So our concern from the state position is that this bill absolutely regulates nothing. It probably, in effect, overturns the City of Riverside decision, which was a landmark decision from the California Supreme Court a few months ago, that after 17 years of haze, we finally got some clarity in dispensaries in the state of California and what cities could do or couldn't do to regulate or ban dispensaries in their cities. Because the bill uses the word regulate, but it doesn't include the word ban. So I think we're right back into that gray area where cities will be forced to go back and legislate. This very well could overturn the recent City of Los Angeles election. I think you had 3 ballot measures.
Yes.
And this might throw some confusion into what you're doing in the City of Los Angeles right now, which again concerns us. This bill lets dispensaries take unlimited amount of cash out of their operations, which again are supposed to be a nonprofit environment. And this bill does nothing to address the recommendation fraud that's rampant in the medical marijuana industry right now. This bill is opposed by virtually every law enforcement agency in the state, including the Los Angeles Police Protective League, also former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, and former Obama administration drug policy advisor Kevin Sabet. The International Faith-Based Coalition, which represents over 4,500 inner-city churches in California, are opposing this. And what's in conflict, because Senator Steinberg has been a strong advocate of mental health in the state. And the California Psychiatric Association came out last week, and they are opposed to this legislation. Their concerns deal with the effect it's going to have on people with psychiatric issues. From a law enforcement standpoint, again, this bill does nothing to control the recommendation fraud that's rampant in California. This bill, again, over 200 cities in the state of California have decided to ban marijuana dispensaries. And this bill puts those decisions at risk and very well might force every one of these cities to litigate that decision. One of our biggest concerns is the impact it's going to have on marijuana cultivation. As you're aware, cultivation is rampant throughout the state of California, and what's going on with the destruction of public lands with marijuana and the chemicals that are used during that process. And finally, as I'm sure you know, here in Los Angeles, there are some of these dispensaries are nothing more than magnets for criminal activity, where we have issues surrounding the dispensaries. The drugs are diverted as soon as they're purchased from there. So again, we would strongly recommend that or ask that you oppose SB 439.
Okay, and before I go to you, Chief, I want to say to Chief Rainey, we will closely monitor what's going on. So in the event that there needs to be an official position by the city, we'll be in a position to make that. But at this juncture, all of the intel that I am receiving is that these 3 bills will stay on suspense. But again, as I'm speaking to you, that could change. So we will closely monitor it and then be in a position to act one way or another. With that said, Mr. Parks?
I would just ask that on SB 439 and SB 566, we have some documents from the California narcotics officers, the California police chiefs analysis. If we could put those in council file,
no question.
we'd appreciate it.
Sergeants, if you could get the documents and hand them to the clerk. Councilmember Parks has documents.
Can I just
go right ahead?
Go off the agenda for a second.
Go off the agenda.
Just 1 second. Just 1 second. We have 2 items that are in committee. We just asked if the possibility of waiver. One is the renaming of the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge in honor of Willie L. Brown.
I had heard something about that.
So if that could be waived, and the other one, which impacts probably the west side and the 8th District more than anyone else is this last remaining fracking bill, SB 4.
Okay, well, let me get some more data on your second
Okay.
request, but the one where it relates to Willie Brown, I'm very, in fact, somebody just talked to me about that this week. So no, we will release that and send it directly to the council.
Okay, and just one comment on the fracking. 7 bills started. This is the only remaining, and it's the only effort to make some sense of fracking throughout the state. And
Well,
so,
give me a moment,
Okay.
because you kind of caught me off guard here. So I will look into that. The Bay Bridge thing, any opposition? I know I shouldn't be doing this, but the attorney hasn't stopped me yet. Okay, so it's too late, Ari. It's too late. It's been done. All right, so items 5, 6, and 7 will be continued.
Sir, pardon me, sir. I believe that was 5, 6, and 8.
Okay, I was testing you, and you passed, Alan. I'm proud of you. So those items will be continued and closely monitored. That brings us to item 7, correct?
Yes, sir. Item number 7, resolution to Englander Buscaino.
If I could ask President Pro Tem Mitch Englander to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank
Chair,
you.
appreciate the time. And this is a critically important matter, council members. This is an item that has been forthcoming for many years under a lot of discussion and review. The idea that this bill...
You brought Doug with you?
Yeah, I brought the big guns with me, sir.
Did you
yes.
think that was going to influence this committee in a positive way?
I knew that it would. Today was a shower
you knew
day,
that it
so
would.
I figured I would bring him with me. And we can have him sit up front here as well.
Yeah, you know what? I think
Have a
you
seat,
should
Doug.
come
on.
sit
You don't have
right
to talk.
there.
Just sit right here, Doug. Come on.
Sit right next to the
So
President
with
Pro
that,
Tem.
in all seriousness, this is really a fair and equitable thing that Sacramento is finally doing to allow our reserve officers, when they depart from service honorably, as every other officer does, to allow them to carry a CCW. These are the folks that are volunteers throughout the state of California that put themselves on the front line protecting us for free. LA County allows it. Most every other law agency in the entire state allows it. This will conform and allow uniformity. And these are the folks that have gone through the same background and training, that have worked on the job in a patrol car, that have carried sidearm with them, that have gone through not only the same training, but have to qualify every other month for 20 years at LAPD at a range with firearm instructors. And so what I'm asking, though, is a minor change, that we support this bill, but we do seek one minor adjustment amendment. I would ask that this committee approve the bill and ask the CLA to draft an amended resolution with one specific change, and that is right now it's asking for level 1 officers. It should include level 1 and level 2 officers, not level 3, but level 1 and level 2 officers, since there's very few differences between the two. With that, I also want to acknowledge on the Public Safety Committee chair in the Senate, Senator Knight is a former LAPD officer. In fact, he was my reserve coordinator and instructor at LAPD as well.
Is he the son of
He is.
the guy with the right stuff?
Yeah, Pete Knight's son, Steve Knight, yes, and worked out of Devonshire and many other places throughout LAPD in his career.
That I did not know.
Yes. So ask that we support it. We seek that one change, that one amendment, and ask the CLA to draft the amendment for council.
All right. What I will recommend on this is that we adopt the CLA's report. We incorporate the amendment that was suggested, and we move forward on this issue. So any objection? Okay, then so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Any other business before this committee, Mr. Clerk?
No, sir. Only general public comment.
Oh, Mr. Sachs. Hey, Mr. Sachs. Let me keep it professional. Professional. Please come forward. Arnold for general public comment.
Good morning, Arnold Sachs. A couple of things. You may not be concerned about the city attorney and you going off subject on your items on the agenda, but you should be concerned about people in the audience who know better.
I know I'm going to get it, Arnold.
So
Sometimes
that
I can't
just
help
aside,
myself.
But I was I was going to say something, but I didn't want to say something.
I know. I know.
But what was really interesting, the other part that, and just overhearing some things, was your comment about the movement of the bills through the legislature. And I find that very, very impressive because we've had other city council presidents here, and there doesn't seem to be that knowledge. And you take this little bit of knowledge and you combine it with the fact that there was legislation that was passed that allows the governor to meet with the county board of supervisors in closed session, quote unquote, on matters of grave importance. And this, in this instance, it turned out to be the funding for the realignment AB 30 bill that was also used supposedly for the schools and realignment. But it's just interesting how this city is turning into be Sacramento South. I have no problems with councilmen, although I don't know, because sometimes you read in the papers how they bashed the legislature in Sacramento, and then what ends up happening is they come down to L.A. to what? Improve the living conditions of the city of L.A.? And we'll talk about that a little bit in budget discussion. So it's very fascinating that you have that insight, Mr. Councilman Wesson, but it's also very scary because that is, what do they say about power? Absolute power corrupts?
Absolutely.
Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Well, that's close. Real close. But you know what, Arnold, just as a tidbit, since I was there, and you see how the legislature is held, you know, at a low popularity rate by people throughout the state of California. But when you poll the individual legislator, they're significantly higher. So it's a real weird situation. So anyway, with that said, Mr. Clerk, any additional business before this committee?
No, sir.
Then this committee is adjourned.